Welcome, everybody, to the Dr. Nobody podcast. Today, I have my friend and my guest, Seth Chitayat. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. I thought I was going to mess that up. Well, thank you very much, Seth, for being on this podcast. We've been friends for over 10 years, I think 12 years since we met a long time ago when I was a wee lad, right?
Yeah. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
We still look the same, except you have a beard now.
Yeah, I hit puberty, I guess. So that's what happens. I guess you look the same, just less hair on the top of your head. Right?
That's very generous of you.
So Seth, can you give the listeners a little introduction to yourself, and then we'll get right into the interview?
Sure. Well, thanks very much, Dr. Nobody, for inviting me here today, and it's a real pleasure to be with you and see you again. It's great to be here. So, at the moment, I work at McGill University, where I'm a director of foundation relations and strategy, and my job is to build partnerships with grant-making foundations and to help advance research and training at McGill.
Nice. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in. Can you break it down for our listeners, like if I was a 5-year-old?
So what I would say is that there are ways in which university research is supported, and oftentimes that comes from granting agencies, and there are other partners that also support academic research. These interests are to knowledge users, and so knowledge users partner with academics and build partnerships, and those partnerships help to extend the value of what it is that universities do within at least in my case, in Montreal and beyond. And so working in partnership with different knowledge users and different partners allow you to really create impact, not just regionally, but also internationally and nationally as well.
So is this kind of like, for me, I just never thought of a position like that as a job. Is this like behind the scenes what's happening in universities with people that maybe a job that nobody's ever heard of?
No, I think, no, I wouldn't say that. I think universities are trying to work in ways that are different. If you think back to, the 60s or 50s, universities were incubators, but, oftentimes it was the case they just created things, and those things found themselves into, or at least were disseminated. That knowledge and that competency was disseminated into the society. There wasn't an emphasis on partnership development. In other words, bringing communities together in ways that would facilitate the flow of knowledge. Universities would create it, and then in some way, shape, or form, it would find itself into society. And whereas now I find that increasingly it's the case that universities are trying to be a bit more proactive about how they disseminate knowledge and how they share it. I think they're starting to recognize that they don't have all the answers, and that by working in partnership with other organizations that have have a similar interests and that have a certain view of the world, or that they may share a certain feeling or passion about a particular problem, that they can begin to work together and share ideas and collaborate and build on each other's resources and expertise and competency to really create partnerships that are long lasting and mutually beneficial, and that create value for the people they serve. And so, it recognizes that universities have strength in research and in other capacities. There may be other partners that can make use of that knowledge and make use of that expertise to really, help extend, if you will, that competency and apply it into a particular domain or a particular area of the world where that knowledge and expertise is so desperately needed. And to create and affect that change.
Mhm. So when I keep hearing partnerships, this is both in Canada and international, right?
Yeah, I mean, the United States operates in a similar way in Canada in this regard. Partnership development is, I think partnership development is something that um, is often associated with industry partnerships, so industrial collaboration with academia. And the fact is that there are other different partnerships as well that exist that are meaningful and that are also meaningful and that also help to move knowledge into the public arena. So, or out, I shouldn't say public arena, but really help to target it and focus it in ways to create uh, value. And sometimes, I should also comment that sometimes partnerships uh, are also helpful in the writing of publications. So I guess in that vein, there are examples of it going to the public arena, but sometimes it's a bit more subtle, and again, it's a bit more focused on addressing a particular problem and helping to resolve a particular challenge.
So I was leaning with that as a follow up is has COVID put a strain on this partnership, forming the partnerships, finding the partnerships, sustaining the partnerships?
I would say that in a way, um, COVID has made it in a way easier, but to connect with people, and it's I think it's been easier to speak to people, obviously because we're all at home and we're working in different ways. We're not necessarily on planes and trains and driving around trying to be in different places, and so I think in that regard it's been easier. I'd say that the problem or the challenges associated with COVID, I think, is that it's introduced a lot of noise. I know that your viewers might or listeners might think that I'm being I'm being um, I'm being I'm diminishing the impact of COVID. COVID has been terrible and a real a very difficult time for many people, and it's certainly devastated our our world and certainly those who lost loved ones. I'm sure, and words can't really explain and express um, how they feel and how they were stripped away of that loss so early. Um, what COVID, I think, has done, no, is that it for people in my role, I'd say is that it's made it a bit easier to connect, but it's also made it harder to build those partnerships because you can't see each other. Part of the idea of partnership development is being able to be together and to have an opportunity to see each other's uh, to see each other's environment, if you will, see each other's um, lab, or for example, see the infrastructure in the lab. So right now we're it's almost like you're laying the foundation for something to happen into the future. In other words, there's almost this agreement to say, yeah, this is a really great idea, but when things calm down with COVID or after COVID, or after at least things become more open, I should say, that um, you know the discussion about partnership development can enter a next phase, and when we're able to meet in person. So sometimes, in a way, like depending on uh, the nature of the relationship, depending on the you know, depending on the if it's early or if it's mature, it's established, it's proven. Some that there's obviously some variation in this, but in nascent stages of partnership development, at least from my perspective, it's always better to see people in person and to kind of connect at that level and to help advance a conversation. And so, I suppose that the virtual context in which we operate does or could anyway make it more difficult to connect and meet up in person, and that can push back the timing of when a partnership could be formalized.
Doing a little transition here. I know your background is structural biochemistry, right? How does someone with that type of PhD end up in your position? Can you tell us your story, how you started from before your PhD, got your PhD, and then now where you are now in this position? And give us the TLDR, the too long didn't read. So in a quick fashion.
Well, there really was no plan. I'd say that I wanted to get out of the house, and so I finished high school at 18, went to university, and made a deliberate decision to leave the city I was living in, which was Toronto at the time. I'm from Montreal originally, and I went to Queen's and Queen's University, not Queen's College, and I did my 4 years there in biochemistry. I didn't really have any advice going into my 4-year degree. I mean, my uncle himself was a biochemist. I had a few experiences working at his company, in working in sales and marketing, and I kind of understood at a very high level the idea of genomics and genetics, and so it just was interesting to see scientists connect in labs and just having lab meetings and being part of this effort. To me, at the time, this was in the mid to late '90s, and so genomic sequencing was a really big deal, especially human sequencing and human DNA sequencing, and so a lot of effort was really being committed to try and improve and the resolution of data and also the timeliness of data. And so, to make a long story short, or a long story long, that experience was kind of really helped to inform what I wanted to study. Plus, at the time, I looked up to my uncle, and I saw he was a biochemist, and I saw that he was very living comfortably, and I felt that was a reasonable thing to do. So I pursued a 4-year program, and then towards the end of the program, I really had no idea where I was going to go. At the time, the university really didn't have much by way of career services or any real student advisors. And so when an opportunity to work in a lab that had just started out, and the principal investigator at the time was just hired, he would think he was in his early 30s, and he was pretty easygoing. I felt sure I could see myself here, and there's a lot of money backing him and backing the infrastructure in the biochemistry department at the time. So I said, sure, why I don't have to move anywhere. It was just comfortable, and I just decided to sign on. And I did my 5 years at Queen's, and then I moved to Nashville. That's where we met. And in 2008, 2009, the Great Recession hit, and I saw that postdocs were really struggling to land their next position. There were hiring freezes across the country, NIH funding dried up, and it was a very difficult time. And so I felt that there need to be a different way to do things here. And this idea about building these empires led by PIs just didn't make any sense. And so when I came back to Canada, Toronto, in 2011, 2010, I completed my second postdoctoral fellowship, and I just realized that that the things need to be done differently. I was just absolutely sure of it, and the extent that I went back to do my MBA at the Rotman School of Management, UT, University of Toronto. And so with my business training, I worked closely with the Dean of Medicine at Queen's, and the research Vice Dean, and where we began and launched a partnership strategy that was really focused on trying to build mutually beneficial relationships with industry. And I also worked closely with faculty to build new research efforts that secured new funding for those initiatives. And towards the end of, towards 2019, the end of Dean's term, I decided to take on a new role at McGill as Director of Foundation Relations and Strategy, which brings us to full circle what my interest was, or it still is, around partnership development. In this case, I work closely with grant making foundations, and so obviously I'm trying hard to build out those opportunities for investigators across McGill, and working with new knowledge partners and building on those that are already in place.
So you keep mentioning partnership and the full circle of partnership. I feel like over the years we formed a partnership, and I've, besides our friendship, we also have, I consider you my mentor, and a lot of the reason why I've been so successful in my life. You know, before we get into that story and telling the listeners about it, um, did you have a mentor? Well, sorry, let me take one step further back. What's mentorship to you? What does it mean to you?
It's interesting you asked that question. I mean, for me, I feel that mentorship is something that is always seen as something extra. And it's unfortunate that we only have 90 minutes, but, to talk about this. But, mentorship to me is not something extra. What I mean by that is that, in ways I think that I'm familiar with it, it's always been structured mentorship. So it's almost that, you had to fill out forms, you had to go through HR, you had to, put together goals, and you had to follow up with your mentor. There was such a power dynamic that existed, or that exists in what we know as mentorship today. And I think it's wrong. And I think that, sometimes with friends, it's difficult to kind of get that advice and to get that structured counsel. But it should really it should be something that's more freely available to not just help someone in their career, but to help someone overall. And that's what friendship is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we spoke in the past, it didn't always focus on, your career. It focused on a variety of things that were going on in your life at the time. And, sometimes, with mentorship, because it's so focused on this idea, or it's conflated with career development, that, it misses out on other things that are going on in someone's life that might shed light on to why they're not following up accordingly, why they're not, on LinkedIn and rewriting their CV and doing the things that the mentor is telling them to do in a top-down way. So the power dynamic is a struggle, and I also think that it doesn't always yield positive outcomes. And mentorship that is also provided in ways where you have these student groups on campus, or you have these professional student groups that come together, that talk about their career experiences and the opine and how they did this and they did that. I mean, it's also gross and not helpful either, because you and I both have PhDs, but we took different paths. And if I want to move, let's say, for example, into the pharmaceutical industry, just because someone has that experience doesn't mean that this translates to me. Sometimes it's the case that it's a lot deeper than that. It's a lot deeper than the credentials you have. There are other things that are there that make it more difficult for one to transition than the other. I guess to answer your question, for me, it's not just about the career, and it's about the person, and it's also about it's also two-way conversation, right? Because when you and I talk, I learn from you and you learn from me, and that's just the way it is. There's some things that I might have over time, right, because I'm 8 or 9 years older than you are, that I've covered more ground. So, if you needed help on buying a house, yeah, okay, well, I've been there, done that before, and so I can offer that advice. But, I'd say that in terms of, other things that have gone on personally or professionally, there are things that you can inform me of, and and that would help to enrich my life. And so, for me, mentorship is something that's that can only be realized in ways that build on a trusting relationship, and not something that's transactional, where there's a power dynamic, or where there's a student group that fancies itself with a particular interest in how it's so easy to go from point A to point B. My uncle used to have a saying that no two hands are the same, and the fact is that just because one person managed to work or transition into the pharmaceutical industry, let's say, or health industry, it doesn't necessarily mean that it A, works for everyone else, and B, that even if it is an opportunity, it might be just, again, sometimes it's deeper than the problem runs deep.
Yeah, and you hit a couple points that I wanted to talk about, but that last one there is one of the ones I wanted to talk about with you. Is we definitely took different paths, but we did both start at a PhD, and we just ended up in different places. But I think in terms of looking back of our mentorship together, it's gone. So for me, a mentor and an advisor are two different things. An advisor hits on what you said, where they're just very logistical. Hey, do this, sign up for this class. This is a good book for you, blah, blah, blah. But our mentorship, well, your mentorship to me has gone beyond that. You've been there for me throughout my life's events. You've been there through the good times, bad times. You've given me advice. But you did say something, and it was my question to you, and I've never asked you this before, but how has the mentorship affected you between us? And have you felt like I've mentored you in a different way than how I perceive mentorship, you to me? Does that make sense?
I don't really understand how an advisory mentorship and being an advisor, to me, really are not separate. I mean, they're kind of similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because getting advice is helpful, but that also helps to grow an individual, because it helps to shed light on a perspective he didn't have before. I say that, for me, like, to give you an example, right? One thing that really impresses me about you is you're resilient. You know, I mean, you've overcome a lot of adversity, and you've dealt with many things that I haven't had to deal with, and you managed to stand up on your 2 feet, and in spite of it all, and so you came out on top. Um, I think that from the time I met almost 13 years ago to now, I mean, it's hard to, you're in your house, and you have a comfortable layout, and who knew, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess the thing is that for me, I've dealt and overcome a lot of adversity, but I feel that somehow it was I was able to get to the other side only with brute force, whereas sometimes with you, you're able to do with a bit of class. And that to me is very impressive. So
Thank you.
for me, I like to think I can land on my 2 feet, although I'm bruised and bloodied, but you land your 2 feet in grace. So I think that regard, sometimes I'd say that our ways of dealing with problems or addressing problems are different. But the fact that you can land on your feet and with grace says something about you. And I'd say that for me, I try and reflect on that and say, well, how can I land better?
And how has our mentor mentee relationship affected you in your life?
But this is the thing, though. Like, it's not, the mentor mentee thing introduces a power dynamic. I never really felt that there was a power dynamic between us.
Mm.
I think that if you are going to advise somebody, you can't be better than them. You can't go in to say, well, I know more, and I'm going to set them straight, and I am full of this knowledge. And I think the reality is that everybody should be receptive, and everybody should be interested to help others.
Absolutely agree.
And we're not talking about what kind of car should I buy. Like, I think the problems we're facing today are huge, and I'm not just talking about that. There's obviously the backdrop of COVID, of inflation, whatever. Those are big macro things. Everyone has their own baggage, and we need to come to a place where we realize that we can't be productive unless we deal with our baggage. And it's not always the case that we can always, be in therapy 24 hours a day to deal with our baggage. I think there need to be outlets that we all have access to, which allow us to relieve some of this tension. And that's why I think that, you have close friends, and you don't have to have many, but when you have close friends and you're able to reach out and able to have serious conversations about, a problem, whether it be career, whether it be relationship or whatever, because again, there are no boundaries in any type of advisory, quote unquote, as you point out, or this whole mentor-mentee thing. There are no boundaries, right? There are no guardrails. It's whatever you want to talk about sticks, and it's the issue of the day. And so, if there's a way to talk about the issue of the day and we deal with it, then great. And it's a continuing dialogue. It's not like we have one conversation and then it ends.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's a continuum, right? But the
Yes.
point is that it's that I heard you, and or you heard me, and we continue that line of discussion until it's resolved. And it might not be resolved, but at least we have an opportunity to talk about it and hopefully to figure out a way forward. And we're all trying to achieve, Dr. Nobody, is health, financial security, right? Health,
Yep.
financial, and social security. Those are the things that we're really trying to achieve.
Is Social Security the one you're trying to collect, or is that just social standards?
Well, Social Security, I understand. Social Security just means the idea that I could walk out. Well, maybe I'm being naive here, but we just all want to feel safe, right?
No,
and
I agree. Yes.
And feeling safe means that you have money in your pocket, and feeling safe means that you have your health, and you're free of violence. You're free of oppression. So that's really what we're all vying for, at least to me anyway. And the fact is that no one person can grant that. But if we all, if we're able to work out and navigate some of the challenges we have in our life, then maybe we can achieve that through conversation and through continuous support that we have from our friends. It's just, everybody is under the same pressure. We have bills, we have expectations that we put on ourselves, or society puts on us, and we need to try and respond to those challenges and responsibilities, or uphold those responsibilities, and try and move forward. But I think what I'm saying here is that it's important for by coming together, rather, and building off these shared interests of wanting to be safe and wanting to be comforted, that we need to be more open and to take on a more of a collectivist approach in helping to not just build our careers, but also help to strengthen our families and strengthen our friendships.
One thing I want to make sure that the listeners are understanding from all this about the mentor relationship is that, at least for our example between each other, is that I have definitely had other people throughout my career, my life up to this point, that were mentor like, and we did have relationships, but it was nothing compared to what you and I had. And I always, I guess I made myself kind of this uh just, you establish such a high um mentality of what a mentor should be like for me, that I always kept looking for that mentality and that behavior in other people, and they never achieved it. Which is, that's just because, one, we had our friendship and our throughout all these years, and these have been people that have tried. But I think the point I'm trying to make here, and what you're trying to say, is that mentor relationship can go beyond what the definition of a mentor mentee relationship should be like. And that's what really I want to hit home is, you have helped me in my personal life, in my career, and I think vice versa. We hopefully, I think, on the other end. But it doesn't have to be a power dynamic, as you're saying. These mentors can be other people just like you. It could be maybe your parents, or just, your uncle, or whoever it is, but someone who's there for you with the right mentality, and what they want to do is just help you get to where you want to be in whatever way capacity they can. And sometimes these mentors mentee relationships are not perfect, and they may not have what you need, but then there's additional, opportunities where you seek out and look for other things, and where you're missing.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we're not, that mentorship is not something, and again, I hate to use the word mentorship because I don't feel it's something separate from what we do as friends, or what we do as just, even could be colleagues. It doesn't have to be wrapped into this pomp and circumstance.
Mhm.
I think at the end of the day that mentorship and support, or whatever you want to call it, advice, should be given to kids, or given to kids, at younger ages. In other words, I say that we're kids because we're going 18, going to university. But I mean, the truth is that students should be getting support when they're in elementary school and throughout high school, because really, at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, to throw them into a situation where they're committed to a 4-year degree, let's say, uh, in college, to pursue a certain study, right? And then to move on, there's this constraining. In other words, I feel like as I get older, you're kind of this narrowing. There's a bit of a. It's not a tunnel. It's almost like this narrowing path, because over time, your opportunity to change and to pivot uh, is somehow or somewhat constrained because of what you have going on. In other words, I have 2 kids and I'm married and have a house. So for me to just essentially drop my job and to go into undergrad and to retrain as an economist or something just is not on the cards, because who's going to pay for that? And what are the, so in a way, there's a huge cost associated with this, with a potential mismatch between a student who, let's say, goes into biochemistry but really wants to be an economist. It doesn't really, and I'm saying that because they took Econ 101 or something, and they said, okay, well, my heart's really in economics, but I'm already too far gone biochemistry, so I can't just go back because then I have to take on all this other debt to finance it. But
Mhm.
had they known about it earlier, say, wow, like in high school, for instance, if you had experiential learning to, you know, uh, to to the Fed, or to Bank of Canada, right, and to have that experience working with central bankers, or to have that experience working with investment institutions, to see the robustness of a degree in economics, what it can get you. You're like, wow, this is great. Or let's say, similarly, you went to a museum and you saw the fantastic artwork that was being generated and created by artists. You might decide to pursue a career in art history, and that's fine. But we're not really, what's amazing to me is that with social media and Twitter and Facebook and all this other thing, like, those platforms, at least to my knowledge, I mean, I don't subscribe to them, so maybe I'm just talking, I'm just blowing smoke, but like, there's no, these are all virtual experiences that we have. They're not real,
Mm-hmm.
and my worry is that kids are not going to have that opportunity to really go out, and especially with COVID and restrictions, to go out into different businesses and units and to kind of get that experience. Right now, their time is spent online, and we're not realizing that the conversation around advice or exposure to experiential learning, let's say, just starts too late. And the fact that it starts too late, it means that we react more. So this idea of mentorship is, I think, more of a reaction in some ways, because it's, like, you're in the program, for example, like when I was doing my MBA, like, you could sign up for mentorship, right? That's like when you're in the program and you're kind of, getting out, and then you have questions around what you want to do. And, there's no, you weren't able to think about what you want to talk about. But if you had earlier experiences and you're already in the setting, and invariably come up with questions and curiosity, and then if we're able to support children having multiple experiential learning opportunities throughout their primary and secondary years, then they're better informed about what they want to do. And so when they go to college, they hit the ground running, and they're able to pursue what it is that they want. Because, again, as a society, I feel like we're losing a lot of productivity because where there's a mismatch between the person and the job, and there's also a loss in productivities because it's oftentimes that employers are looking for people who are in these jobs that, let's say they're not really perfectly happy about, but they can't find them, and those connections are not made. So, but I guess in utopia, or in a world where everyone is informed, and not so much there's perfect information, but everyone's well informed, better informed about what they want to do, they can hit the ground running and make the more of their college experience, create more value for themselves in ways that are easier. It's not such a struggle to kind of create that value. When I look at my own career pathway per se, I mean, I didn't really earn money until I was 31.
Wow.
So
it's a long time.
I think that, and even then when I started working, I didn't feel that sense of security. And it was like every day was a struggle, because you always try and improve yourself, and I felt, in a way, because there was no traditional path. I mean, of course, if I did a postdoc and I published so many papers as first author, then you can move into a tenure track position and become a tenured professor. But that wasn't really there for me. And so the fact that, when you're off that path, that linear path, it's you're kind of entering in, we're moving into a zone where you're really just reacting and just trying to figure out what your next step is. And it was a struggle to move off the more traditional path into something that was, let's say, less clear. And those who presumably, quote unquote, I'm using quotations right now in air quotes for those people who are listening, that for those people who kind of mentored me, if you will, right? Like, in other words, previously my PhD supervisor, for example, or postdoctoral fellow supervisors, they don't know how to mentor you. They don't know how to support you. Like, if you're not on the beaten path to become a professor,
Absolutely.
they don't know how to support you.
Yeah.
And so I was on my own. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have an advisor. I didn't have friends even who understood what I was going through. It was a real struggle. And when I was working with the dean, or when you're doing things that are new and doing things that are somewhat high risk, that sometimes things just don't turn out. And because you're in an environment where, again, you're not really protected. You don't have, as a professor, you're somewhat protected. I'm not talking about academic freedom, but you're protected in the sense that there's tenure, there's status. When you're staff, you're not really, at least when I was working, I didn't feel as as secure. And sometimes in things would happen and unexpected outcomes would be realized, and stressful because, again, like if where else would you go? And so it's sometimes I feel like that when you're taking these non-traditional paths, that that you don't have that sense of security, and it's hard to find friends, or hard to find, I shouldn't say friends, it's hard to find mentors who can really kind of advise in that non-traditional way, because they can't necessarily identify with the path you took to begin with. That makes sense. In other words, like I have my one of my other friends is a emergency physician, right? We studied in undergrad together, but he has no idea what I do. He has no idea what I do. And even I have another friend who also does PhD, also has an MBA. We met in grad school, and he's doing something completely different. And so, even with people of the same degrees.
So I actually want to jump in here and um, just I keep mentioning that I know exactly what you were dealing with, and I think with my own story is that, like, during my PhD, I knew going into PhD I was not going to be a professor in any shape, way, or form. I didn't want to do that. I knew that from day one. So going through the program, a lot of people didn't know how to deal with that or talk to me or give me advice. So I was always looking for people in that circle to help me until I found a separate program that actually helped students that wanted to go outside academia. And even my personal advisor, my PhD advisor, wasn't too friendly about to the fact that I was going to graduate and I was not going to work in a lab anymore. So, the listeners will have heard or will hear about that story during my PhD. But you were there for me and you gave me advice and helped me get through it. But essentially, he was pretty useless to me in terms of trying to get me a position or job or just even information outside the academia space. And this goes for any type of job, not just academia. There are some jobs where programs that you do, you're expected to do something at the end, whatever the position is. And when you go outside that norm, it just shuts down the system. Like, everybody freaks out, they don't know what to do, and it's just the way it is, and it's the way you can circumvent those issues or uh, get past them to succeed on your own, or through mentors or people that can just give you advice, or have also done it as well. So yeah, I totally can relate to that. But I wanted to transition to one more question on mentoring and then move off to a different topic. When someone is thinking about finding a mentor, because after they listen to this, maybe they might start thinking about, okay, who in my life can be a mentor to me? Who in my life related to my current career path or dreams, unrelated to my dreams or career path, it doesn't matter. What are some characteristics you think that they should be looking for in a mentor, and what are things they should be looking for as a red flag that wouldn't be a good fit for a mentor?
I think you first have to understand what it is that you want. You have to know what the problem is. Sometimes we don't really know what the problem we're trying to solve for is, but you need to have a sense of what it is that you want to get out of any conversation, right? Before you have it. And there may be some people who are better suited to have a serious discussion. Let's just say, forget about mentorship. Let's just say, who is able to have a serious discussion and to have a longer than a 5-minute attention span. And so if you can, maybe that can help you narrow down who you would reach out to and have that conversation with. The other thing I would say is that you wouldn't want to speak to somebody. I mean, those are not the only two criteria that I would use. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't want to speak to somebody who's condescending and who has a history of speaking down to you or making you feel bad. So, but if you're aware of those concerns, and if you're able to use them to filter out who it is that you speak to, you want it to, I think you obviously want to be comfortable, being vulnerable, at least at some level, because you're coming to them not just for advice or mentorship, but you're coming to them because you don't really know the answers to certain things that you're struggling with or that you might be thinking about. So I think it's important to search for someone who at least, filtering out people, if you're able to kind of look at that person through those through that lens, I guess, if you will, then, or that broader lens, then that would be something, or someone who I would consult with and talk to, and
something to avoid.
Well, something to avoid is what I just said. Like, I think you don't want to speak to somebody who you don't, just right off the bat, don't respect. That who speaks, or someone who's made you feel bad in the past, or someone who fundamentally disagree with on key issues. I think that could be a problem. And I should be careful with what I say about that, because I know that, sometimes politics gets in the way, but, you're able to navigate that and, focus on the positives, if you will, or focus on areas where you do have agreement, then that could be a helpful discussion. But the key thing is you don't want to deal with people who make you feel bad, or again, who introduces power dynamic, and you want to talk to people who can listen, not necessarily speak and presume things.
Okay, thank you. So, expanding on mentorship and your career in your life, can you give the listeners, just so that they know you're human, your worst career moment and your best? So, I should say worst career or life moment and your best career or life moment.
I would say that my worst career moment was, and this is kind of related to the struggles that I was referring to earlier, is that, problem with, at least when I was going through it, grad school, was that you're only valued based on how many publications you produced and how many awards you got and how many conferences you went to. It was almost like you were somewhat of a widget. And, and there are all these different metrics to evaluate, at least in this case, me. And sometimes that would be really quite diminishing. It was really quite, didn't feel good just to be measured on using those quantitative measures, because sometimes projects are difficult, and sometimes, cloning a gene can take 6 months for whatever reason. And so I felt in a way that I was underappreciated. And also, when I was at Vanderbilt, there were moments, again, I was dealing with a lot of personal issues at the time. My dad was cancer, and I was going back and forth to Montreal. And at the time, I wasn't able to produce a first author publication after 2.5 years working in the lab. And it was a very stressful time, because I guess that expectation, had come to fruition, or at least had materialized for others. And I got the feeling that there was some patience, and again, the underappreciation, the some of the hardship associated with being able to respond to the growing expectations was, I say, those were difficult moments. And then, even when I did tremendous work, back when I came back to Canada working at Queen's, I felt that appreciation wasn't always there. And it was very hard for me to swallow, even though that I knew what I had done was really tremendous. So I'd say that feeling underappreciated is a problem, and sometimes it can be self-defeating. I mean, you have to rise up to it and you have to overcome it. And there are ways in which I overcame it when I was at Vanderbilt. And sometimes underappreciation is unintentional. Sometimes just because the person you're reporting into just doesn't know. They have a lot going on. They just don't know. And you have to make them aware of it. So that was the case in Vanderbilt. And at the case of Queens, it was really just more of leadership changes and getting caught in the middle. So I feel that, again, those experiences, I felt very alone. I got counseling when I was at Nashville to help navigate those difficult situations, and that was helpful. And when I was at Queens, I admittedly I had to look elsewhere, and I'm grateful that McGill recognized my credentials, and my boss appreciated what I brought to bear, and that's was very meaningful to me.
Was that your like one moment in your life where things started turning great? Like your aha, like this is awesome. This is where it's going to keep chugging, or did you still face some adversity or some issues moving forward from there?
From when I left Queens, or from just when
You got from McGill, yeah, after you left Queens, yeah.
Well, I this is the other thing too. Sometimes mentorship and advice is really within your own backyard. I mean, my wife has been a rock. I'm very grateful to her. I'm very grateful to my kids for what they've been able to do for me, because I had to move to Montreal, and that meant being away from home 5 days a week, and
Wow.
that was very difficult on her, and very difficult on the kids too. So I'm very grateful to them for providing me with that flexibility to go back and forth. And I'm also very grateful to McGill for being understanding as well, that I'm based in Toronto and giving me opportunities to work here where and when appropriate. So that was appreciated, and so I think in that case, again, I wouldn't say that there was mentorship there, but I think sometimes it gives people the impression that you have to search outside your family unit in order to get it, or somehow it's a work thing. It's not a work thing; it's a life thing. And when you have a caring employer and when you have a caring family, that makes it better sometimes. And I shouldn't say sometimes, makes it better all the time. And it makes difficult things realizable. And so that was a difficult period, but I got through it because of my wife and my kids, and also my employer, and also, I work hard. I mean, again, I mentioned to you before that there's one of the things that grad school and the postdoctoral experiences taught me was how to work long hours, and how to pull through, and how to really see the forest from the trees. I think where one of the things that has been interesting over the course of my career, and I think you could identify with this as well, or you can identify as well, is that if it was easy, it would have been done already. And you're always creating new things, creating new knowledge that needs to be translated or disseminated. You're creating new awareness. And the fact you're always doing something that's new, and the fact you're doing something that's different, means that you'll make mistakes, and means that there'll be missteps, but you learn. And I remember my colleague coming over to my house once, and she said to me, "How did you do it? Like, how do you came to Montreal, and you're working at McGill, and you're coming back to Toronto, see your family, and you're working really hard." And I pointed a picture to her I had of me and another grad student who started at the same time in the lab. And we couldn't have had different projects. Our had totally different experiences in grad school, but we graduated at the same time. And so to me, the roads are different, but the destination is the same. And I guess that picture for me means a lot because it shows that even if you've had a different experience that arguably might be a bit more complicated or difficult, and one might face more diversity than others, that at the end of the day, that the goal is reachable. But overcoming those moments of difficulty is really where it makes a difference. And in grad school, again, my girlfriend at the time, who turned to be my wife, was wonderful and was a huge supporter. And I have to say that at the time, there were people who were working with me in the department who were technical staff who were very supportive and sympathetic. And there were times when my supervisor would also, I'd have the ear of my supervisor to talk about some challenges, and he was available to listen. So, I think what's my experience, if you were to kind of map it out and think about mentorship and whatnot, I talked about in grad school, the challenges therein, difficult project, new experiences, new protocols to be set up. It takes time. You're building new things, and you're bound to get egg on your face. But there are people there who, again, non-traditional mentors or advisors, technical staff, technicians, working with, talking to other PIs on the floor, because you might want to confide to them things that you can't really comfortably describe or disclose to your supervisor, fellow grad students. And then you move to, being a postdoctoral fellow, and you think, well, you're big cheese there, you know everything, which I didn't. And, there were other postdocs there who were empathetic and who also had challenges. And then I went to see a counselor who was very, very helpful in helping me to describe and to write out exactly what my accomplishments were, that were well received to the principal investigator, and who I really appreciated the experience and the opportunity that he provided me. And then when it came back to Toronto and when it came back to working in Queens, that again, there it was almost like mentorship and advice in ways that you wouldn't have expected. There's just a network of people who you associate with, and that you're able to share, a drink with, so to speak. The closest person even though I was very close and productive with my superiors when I was at Queens, my closest ally and my best friend, while I was there, was the head of surgery. And, he gave me everything. He gave me his time, and he was so generous, and he's such a precious man. And I'd say that in terms of a mentor, in terms of a counselor, I look to him. Actually, in this conversation is just coming out that, for the bulk of my life, I didn't really have that until I met him. And, he and I just hit it off. We thought the same way. We agreed on many things. We worked really hard. We talk at length when we reach on vacation, and really want to try and make things better and to do exciting things. And so we really hit off, and he went to bat for me on many occasions. And that was very appreciated. And he was a very generous man. And when I moved to McGill, he had nothing but the best to say for me. He was referenced for me. And so he didn't pull out. In other words, going back to some of the things that I said about what makes it bad, again, quote unquote mentor, is someone who pulls out, someone who you have to follow and cater to, and kiss their hand, But when you make a decision that they don't agree with, they just pull out and they say, well, forget you, pal. And they leave. But this guy didn't do it. And I was so grateful. And he gave me a nice card, and Harbin got me a nice souvenir, if you will, and it's still in my apartment today.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing and being open, Seth. Those are definitely things I didn't know about as your friend. I thought I was your only friend, to be honest. So it's good that you have other friends. I'm happy for you. And it hurts my feelings a little bit, but that's fine. We could talk about that on the side. But what I want to ask you now, thinking about what you just talked about and being open about your life and your successes, your failures, what are up to 5 things, and just name them out. We can open up the floor after we hear them. What are 5 things that you think are essential in your success that you would like other people to know that has worked for you? Now, it doesn't mean it'll work for them, but just to hear um, what those up to 5 things are.
That have made me successful, Dr. Nobody. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yes, I am.
I just want to make sure that I kind of paint that backdrop, because it's not, what I'm saying here is not can't be scaled. So, I mean, it's kind of been like that for me, but it's not like that for others. I would say that for me, it's tenacity. It's just being able to work hard and to keep both feet moving at this, and to realize that Rome wasn't built in a day. So, to recognize that as you move forward. The second is to find ways to ground yourself. In other words, I think that you really need to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And so it's important to invest in yourself, to find productive outlets. And what I mean by that is it's important to, at least for me, to just be grounded, to be able to find a place or find something or someone who can be that calming, or could have that calming influence. Third is that you need to know when you don't feel good. When you start to have aches and pains in your shoulders, and you're starting to get stressed out, and you're starting to really not feel healthy, to recognize those signals and to change and to pivot accordingly. And so that could take, that may mean you need a change in career. It might mean you need to find ways to document and express these stressors to, again, someone who you care about and someone who can provide that counsel and guidance. Or it might even be that, that person who provides you the guidance could be a therapist, for example. That's fine too. But try and recognize those signals and start making changes. And so that could be looking for other jobs, or it could be going back to school and retraining as something, or something else, I should say. And or at least changing your routine and going for walks and exercise, that could help too. The fourth is to realize that you're always learning. That I feel that I'm always learning what it is that I'm doing, and again, if it was recognizing that if it was easy, we would have done already, and so having that perspective, just putting things in perspective, is important sometimes, especially in the world that we live in today. It's important to really take the long view and not too short on life. And the final thing I would say is that you have to recognize that we can't view relationships as being distributive. In other words, I find sometimes in our in our world today, we're very much about, well, they get more, I get less, and it's all their fault. It's the truth is that the truth is always somewhere in the middle in many cases, and I think we just need to recognize that that we're not widgets here. Um, can't always see things and view relationships being distributive as transactions. You have to really whether it be a gas attendant who fills your gas, or whether it's someone at the grocery store who's who's bagging your groceries. Treat everybody in the way that you want to be treated, and if someone is off, or if someone cut you off when you're driving, it doesn't mean that they're trying to hurt you. It just means that something's going on in their day, and they're not at their best. And patience and seeing things in that way can help things can help make things easier, right? I mean, I'm going to butcher the expression, but it's paraphrasing here, but essentially it's always easier to get things with honey than it is with vinegar.
I don't know that one.
Well, bees are always attracted to honey; they're not attracted to vinegar. So if you're sweet, then more things will stick to you, and as opposed to having some sort of repelling agent, which is like vinegar, which is a bit off-putting.
I like that one. That's a good little thing. With the last couple minutes we have left, I just want to ask one question and then the final one. In terms of your career, and even if it's your current job right now, what's the coolest thing, most exciting thing you've done thus far?
In my career?
Yeah. Or in your current job?
I think it's building something from scratch. Whether I started at when I started at Queen's at my grad school, at my PhD, I should say, you're building something new that no one ever built before. So I think that was really quite common, I'd say, across my career. The other thing I'd say is that I innovated. When I was at Vanderbilt, again, hitting the ground running, grants are due, etc. I really took it upon myself to look to see where there may be another data stored, and to make use of those data that have already been collected rather than collecting new data per se, or finding ways to complement existing data sets to try and get papers out sooner, to get grant figures created sooner. So I innovated in that way, and I really also took on other responsibilities to try and get as many papers out as possible to show productivity, not just for myself, but for the lab as well on that particular project. And, the work I did I'd say over the last 7 years or so, or 8 years, when I was at Queen's and here at McGill too, is that you're building new things, and you're building new programs and building new efforts. And I think that's great. It's exciting. So, some days are better than others, but I say for the most part, that's what intrigues me, is that you're an entrepreneur, or at least I'm an entrepreneur. I like to think of myself as one, and where you're bringing people together who have otherwise been brought together to seize new opportunities and to try and create new partnerships that help extend the value of what it is that we're able to provide to or beyond the university, beyond the academic institution.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. I mean, doing this podcast is entrepreneurial-ish, but yeah, I think that mindset of expanding beyond yourself and beyond your expertise is fun, and you're always learning, and it's exciting. Now, my final question to you to wrap up the interview is, what what's your last departing words for our listeners, or some wisdom, some sage knowledge that you would like to share with them so that they know um, something valuable from you?
I just think here's what I would say, right, is that it's very easy to get into the gutter and to feel bad and to punish yourself and to take everything to heart. It's very easy, and I do it, and it's not always doesn't always result in the best outcomes. I think we all need to take pause and realize that we're really operating in a very, very different environment than our parents did and our grandparents did. Mm-hmm. We're really trying to we're struggling right now. We're struggling with we're coming to head with things that were largely ignored before. I'll let your listeners clue in. Maybe I'm hoping they could pick up on what it is that I'm trying to say. There are things that we ignored, and those are coming to surface now. We're having to deal with them now, and I feel that this technology has also imposed on us. Has also been very imposing. Our use of Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and they create this very tight and over-constrained, over-fit world that some people indulge in. And there's a real disconnect between that world, the real world. And oftentimes people try and project their sense of what's going on virtually within the internet and trying to project it onto real life. And there's obviously a real disconnect there. So I'd say that, technology is imposing kind of in the way that we see this the need to come together and the need to really support the common good, so to speak. And it's also difficult because, there's an economics that's associated with, there's a value that people place on, let's say, if you work in technology or if you work in medicine, there's a certain value that's placed on that and not a value placed on other disciplines. And so there's the spectrum of how, we encourage, different disciplines, and how we, in other words, there's the idea that if you want a successful life, if you want to be on, buy a house and, get a car, not only could it, sometimes achieving those things, depending on where you're living, could be almost impossible. But somehow there's a premium if you're not just a lawyer, but you're a lawyer that has an MBA, that has other advanced degrees. And so sometimes it's, there's been some sort of inflation that has, I'd say, devalued our degrees, and now more degrees are required to be competitive. And there's also certain, again, value of for some degrees over than others, which I don't really agree with, don't appreciate. So I'd say that I'm not sure if it's making a lot of sense, but people can get lost, I guess, is what I'm saying in this world, right? You have employers drawing higher expectations of graduates. You have, these virtual worlds on Facebook creating these realities that don't really exist. And, you have, with COVID, especially with the restrictions, have fewer opportunities to come together. And so it's hard to, and and then you have technology, and the increasing digitization of everything makes it, introduces risk, right? Because there's automation, and where do we fit into this? And will everything be solved with AI and machine learning? So the question is, how do you move forward? How do you come together, and how do you bring order to such disorder? And that's a question that is very difficult to answer, because I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers. That's why it's important to have conversations, and in those conversations to expose your vulnerabilities and to say, listen, I don't really understand what's going on here. Can you help me bring some clarity to this? or you've gone through this before. What do I'm this is where I am right now. Can you help me and shed light onto this for me? And sometimes there are experiences that I can identify with, but just hearing people talk allow them to come to the answer themselves, in ways that are guided through some guided conversation. So I just think that mentorship or advice or whatever you want to call it, there needs to be more willingness to have conversations with people, not by way of text, not by way of email, but like this. Right now I'm sitting, I'm lying, I'm reclining in my chair, I'm having a conversation with you. I could talk this for hours, and
I know.
And so that's it. You need to be relaxed. You need to be in an environment where you don't feel threatened. You don't feel like you're being judged. You don't have to feel like you're being on the clock. And the more we're able to understand each other, to understand the different perspectives that we bring to bear, that's when you have a better world. Because if we shut people out of discussion, from discussion, then or if we're not willing to actually have a conversation, insists by text only, then you can't really express anything, and that's a real concern. I mean, I know this sounds crazy because I'm talking like people who might be listening think I'm like a bit of a hippie or something, but the truth is that, like, for the parents who are listening on the call, I mean, like, I had to text my kids in my own house because I just don't feel like yelling at them upstairs when they're on their computers or they're talking to their friends. Like, what do you want for dinner tonight, for example? Like simple things like that, to get their attention. And even when they're at the dinner table, their friends are on FaceTime, and everybody's listening, and it's just difficult, and I guess my kids are at that age right now where with COVID, they haven't been able to see their friends as often. I mean, they're back in school now, but for a while they were at home remote learning. So this it became normal to them to connect, by way of FaceTime and through Zoom and other modalities. But I think what I'm saying here is that there's a lot of noise, a lot of confusion. There's a lot of difficulty in the way that we communicate, and I just wish that I yearn for simpler times when we just go to a bar and grab a beer and then talk, and not necessarily concern ourselves with expressing our views within 150 characters or 140 characters, whatever Twitter insists on. And frankly, people, want to have conversations about things that are highly politicized or things that are very difficult. Don't just use Twitter and Facebook to promote your views. I mean, just, come out and talk. And we need to have an openness to that, because otherwise it makes it a lot more difficult to move forward in our politics, and it makes it more difficult for us to move forward as nations. We need to come to the table and understand how we can work together, because we're all different and we've all different experiences. We've all suffered in different ways, and we've all had our own challenges. We need to come to the table and listen. I mean, look, you and I come from very different backgrounds, but there are many ways in which we could identify our similarities. If I just judged you based on your appearance, what would that? I would miss out on all the things that really bring us together, that are much deeper than skin color, and background, ethnicity. It's so.
Yeah.
I think the point is that we're all flesh and bone at the end of the day, right? We all bleed, and so when we're cut, hurt. So we all cry when we're sad. So I just wish that we would stop with these divisions, and I feel that technology has kind of created those divisions, and I think our self-indulgence has also created these divisions. With wealth that's been created, we have just insisted on our ways. I want my Starbucks. I want my, I want my egg muffin pot.
So Seth, I to summarize what you're saying is basically let's get back to being personal, not through the internet, not through social media, but just old school. Let's meet up, let's talk, let's chat, let's just be face to face. Is that
It doesn't. Yeah, I mean,
fair?
being face to face sometimes is hard these days. But I think, we just got to get back. We got to reset and recalibrate the way that we speak to each other, and we got to realize that support is not weakness. I'm 42, or I'm turning 42. I don't, getting support and advice is not a weakness for me. It's actually maturity, because you're reaching out and you're asking a question about something. And it might not be the answer that you want, or it might not be, it may not have an answer, but at least you're asking a question. And it's important to have those experiences. We shouldn't, experiences, good or bad, help build character and help build perspective. And that's what's very important in later years, as you grow your career, as you seed new ventures. Because life doesn't get simpler; life gets a lot more complicated. And I think it's not just the fact that you're amassing, you're buying a car, you're buying a house, you're buying this, you're buying that, but it becomes more complicated because and this goes back to a point I said a while ago, is that, people die and you lose that grounding. So how are you going to get that grounding? That's why, in a way, like having friends and having sources of support that you can rely on, that you can pull from, they don't make up for a lost, parent or loved one, but they're there, and there are people you can reach out to. And that's why, there's this expression that my friend came up with, or that's came by before. He said, no one person is an island. In other words, we don't all live in islands. And, whether you're going to private school or whether you're going to private sleepaway camps, etc., you're still benefiting from public infrastructure. There's sewers, there's water, there's sanitation. All these things are public resources, and yet we shy away from that. We don't realize that there's a public infrastructure that's building this wealth for other people, and so we have to give back to that public infrastructure. And so we need to see these connections that we're making as people as part of that public infrastructure, so that it helps us to grow and helps us to lead. I hate to say, I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but to kind of lead, I guess, healthier lives. I'm not using the word productive because I don't feel like that's always a good word to use, because, again, it sounds like we're trying to squeeze somebody out of productivity, but just healthier lives. They have a healthier attitude, and they feel grounded. And when you're feeling grounded, and it adds so much value to, it's so much energy.
So thank you very much, Seth, for your time and sharing your story and being open, and definitely your words of wisdoms and quotes. Is it okay for our listeners to reach out to you on LinkedIn, for any more sage advice or any guidance?
Sure. That sounds great.
Okay. All right. That will be on his profile on the website. Listeners, I really hope you gained plenty of insights today. This helps in the beginning of becoming a someone, but specifically the someone you always wanted to be. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please do give a like and review and subscribe, and visit our website, thedrnobodypodcast.com, where we turn nobodies to somebodies. Talk to you all very soon.